tell us about, it's Atheists Helping the Homeless, right?
Yes.
And now, did you start that here in town, or was there somebody else that got it
No.
going in Kalamazoo, or?
That was started in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
By, I'll even name out because he kind of went off the deep end and no one really associates with him anymore. But there was a meme page on Facebook that would always share memes, and then they had this Atheists Helping the Homeless. Denver was the one that they were sharing with the guy who ran the Denver chapter. And I sent him a message saying, hey, I've seen this in Austin. They've got a couple of them. I think Houston had one, San Antonio, Denver, Los Angeles. So I said, well, what do I have to do? And they said, well, we're pretty just grassroots. You just do it. Okay, so I went out and bought a bunch of stuff, got a couple of buddies together, and started giving out once a month. And then we had switched over, half the chapters had switched over to Atheist Alliance of America. And I have since then went back to Atheists Helping the Homeless, and it was nothing from an ethical standpoint, but they're a gigantic group. They've been around since '83. We kind of wanted to just be a little more small town, grassroots movement, and man, they had a lot of muscle. It was great to be a part of that huge group, but we kind of condensed it back down to our smaller group, and now we have there's 7 chapters that are Atheists Helping the Homeless, and there's 5 that are Atheist Alliance Helping the Homeless, but we're all sister chapters.
Okay. And so, like, how often, I mean, of course, I know everything with the pandemic has messed things up, but in terms of, say, pre-pandemic, I mean, how often were you guys doing food distribution?
Once a month.
Okay.
We stopped completely for 3 months, and then we did 2 of them without food. And this last month, we just did food again. Okay. And we weren't really given the green light to do it yet, but we're watching on the news all these other places where we're giving out food, and we're thinking, well, if we pre-package it and everyone's got gloves and stuff, and we're not letting them touch out everything, we should probably have no problem getting away with it. And we're taking the risk that necessity will override the, maybe simple rules that might say we're not allowed to do that.
Sure. If
someone said anything.
Interesting. So, I mean, what was it that kind of drew you to that initially? I mean, for you personally, how did
to the homeless
doing something like that?
Well, I kept seeing the post on Facebook.
So just seeing the social media.
And I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. What would I have to do to send a donation? And they said, oh, where are you from? Kalamazoo. There's nothing in Michigan.
Okay.
And so St. Louis was the closest chapter that had any type of cold climate, so they thought that'd be interesting to try something around here. So it was just kind of, I liked what I saw, so wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah. And then, so other people that have gotten involved, I mean, those volunteers have been just through social media. Has that been the connection point, or?
We do have some through social media. Few of them were just buddies that I had mentioned to, hey, I'd like to do this. Are you guys interested? And yeah, absolutely. So, there's a few of us, but yes, we have had plenty of people reach out because they saw the post on social media.
Interesting. Okay. So, obviously, I mean, one of the reasons I, wanted to talk with you was that connection, just because even the words atheist is in the name. But so, I mean, what does that mean for you? I mean, what does it mean to be an atheist? I mean, I guess define kind of your own perspective.
Yeah, the best I can do is say how I feel about it, because, that's the problem. There are militant atheists who think there's no way there could be a God, where in general, I think the average atheist would fall more on an agnostic plane, to where we just want to see evidence. And, out of all the 6,000 gods that have been worshipped, we just want to see more that would make us say that, yes, we can confirm, or at least have reason to confirm, that this is the one. So I'm more agnostic than anything else, because the thought of a higher power, there's no way that's not an option. Aliens putting us here, there's no way that's not an option. We don't know. So we're at a very neutral point.
Okay.
And then, of course, there's the militant ones that there can't be, but, you can't prove that there can't be either. So,
so you wouldn't put yourself in that hard and fast camp?
Not at all.
But, okay. Yeah. And then, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was just even, kind of the connection between what you're doing and trying to help the homeless, and then, coming from an atheist position. I mean, how do you get there? Because I know the stereotype, of course, is that atheism sometimes could be very
Yeah, we're humans.
cold
Right.
and uncaring. How does that connection work for you?
We had talked about not using the word atheist in the title, but then we thought, every church does because they're also promoting something. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to show that atheists aren't bad. And, that, if you were to Google what percent of the population is atheist or agnostic skeptic, you're looking at 15 to 30%. Now, that's a pretty wide range because a lot of people just don't say it. A lot of people just keep their mouth shut because you will get blackballed for it. So we thought it would be important to put the name in there so that we could just show, hey, we're just like everybody else. If you were to ask 10 questions about any standard issue, we fall in the same line as everybody else. We celebrate the same holidays. We don't have any different traditions, really. And, so it was more to try to normalize something that people can sometimes find abrasive.
So, yeah, to say that you don't have a sort of a proselytizing agenda or something like that.
Right.
I mean, that was kind of the intent in your mind.
Yeah, well, we're not looking to recruit anybody. We're not talking about religion. People all ask us stuff at the giveaways, but that's not what we're there for. We just want to show that we're just like everybody else and help stop the stigma. That's our main goal, along with helping. So
that's interesting. I mean, what kind of response do you get from people about the atheism label?
A lot of people who will scoff a little bit or like they won't even take the stuff. They'll have a bag of stuff and just set it down and walk away.
Interesting.
The worst one we saw was a woman with a child, and the girl wanted a hot dog so bad she was hungry, and the mom says, "Oh no, they're atheists. We got to go, baby." And then some of the other people, they were yelling, "Get the kid some food," Yeah. So she did end up coming back after somebody went and talked to her. And then I stepped to the side and spoke with her and said, "We're not trying to convert your daughter to anything. We just want her to have something that she might need." And she didn't say a single word to us, but she did take some things. So we get that quite a bit, unfortunately. But that's part of the territory. We knew going into it, that's what we were setting out to stop, too.
I mean, and you kind of touched on it a moment ago, but in terms of, I guess, a worldview or a conviction that sort of undergirds, using the name atheist, would that be more of a commitment to evidence and science? Is that kind of where you're personally coming from in terms of, I guess, why you would steer clear of religion? So my brother is very religious. He's very involved in a local Kalamazoo church here. Okay. We grew up in the same house with the same traditions and everything. And mine was more, I've always wanted to, if I do something, I want to be the best at it. Sure. So I always go read up on something. So I actually became an atheist trying to learn more about Christianity. Okay. And there's things that you do lose. When grandma dies and there's that comfort of seeing her again, that gets kind of depressing at first. Like if somebody starts to realize that they don't feel like they believe, that depression is pretty common just because you do lose a lot of emotional crutches. So you kind of have to look at everything from a different angle and retrain your brain. It was kind of a long road, and it's not uncommon for people to struggle when they find that they don't feel like something makes sense. So yeah, science, everything I look at, we like going to the haunted houses and everything, but I don't find it scary because I'm looking for the science behind how they made that work. It's kind of like a Penn and Teller fool us thing to me. Sure. Than to feel scared and think that there's a ghost. So science is a huge platform. The scientific method of being able to review it and demonstrate it over and over, that's what I look for the most in everything, not just religion and beliefs. How then would you say, obviously, to whatever level of certainty, but how would you say that the world, human beings, came into existence? Do you tend to lean more towards the like a Big Bang and evolution, or what are your thoughts on that?
Science suggests that as far as they know, the universe is expanding, which would suggest the Big Bang. And then, we have evidence of many kinds of evolution. So, but that's as far as I can explain, because that's as far as they've been able to explain, and there's really no way to go back and see. So, that's kind of That's what I'm trusting right now. But
Okay.
just like anything else in science, something could come up tomorrow that would change everything, and that's, yeah, I would say evolution
Sure.
is what I think.
What then? I mean, what do you take as kind of your moral basis? I mean, obviously, in the work that you're doing and trying to help people, there's that says is a statement certainly in and of itself. But what is it that, I mean, how do you arrive at what's your ethical basis, your moral standard?
I think you're going to find this with every religion and every belief. The easiest answer is do unto others as you'd want done to yourself. I don't want you to punch me in the face right now, which I can only assume that's reciprocating. So I think the big difference is when we're doing something like this, we believe that there is no afterlife, so this is our one chance to experience something. So even if somebody who is homeless, maybe they got into drugs, maybe they beat the heck out of their wife and got kicked to the streets after they got out of jail, even if they screwed up royally to get there, this is their one chance to experience something. So even if us helping can change one experience, one moment in one day and make that better, we just improved their life that much more and their one chance to experience something. So it's kind of a better get this in while we can thing more than it is I need to do this for a higher power to get into heaven. And and I'm not dogging that either, because all these churches that help, we got a lot of religious people that come out and help and donate, and anytime somebody lends a hand, it's because it's in their heart, and that's where it belongs.
Sure. I mean, I think in our conversation previously, or what you had written to me, you had mentioned this idea of just kind of common sense and the commonality
Right.
of it. Sometimes, I mean, people, and I don't know if this is a fair accusation or stereotype criticism of an atheist perspective, but sometimes you kind of get this, kind of moving Darwinianism, Darwinian evolution over into ethics, a survival of the fittest and strongest. And I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean,
I think that
in terms of how that.
I'm going to say that falls under more of a misconception,
Okay.
because there's two extreme opposites that I can say that, in my favor, I could say if we Googled what percentage of the prison population is atheist, it's less than 1%. Atheists are less likely to cheat on a spouse. There's a lot of things we fall into some incredible categories, but then you could also say Joseph Stalin was an atheist and he's got the worst genocide in history. So I can only speak for myself.
Uh-huh.
But I don't, the Darwin thing, yeah, there's some good stuff there, but no, I wouldn't exactly say that I follow that to a T. I don't know if I necessarily agree. We need to help those who are unable to survive by themselves through natural selection. We have the ability to do that. We're not wild animals anymore, so
Right.
it's different, I feel, for humans.
Would you say that people are fundamentally good, fundamentally evil? What would you, I mean, in terms of sort of like the moral nature of humanity, how would you?
There's exceptions to every rule, but I think that comes from upbringing. If you aren't taught values, then how are you going to teach your kids values? So I think, especially in this country, we've lacked the last couple of generations in teaching those values. It should be common sense, but people are generally selfish. But I also think that was learned behavior, just in the way we do things here. We're not quite as giving. We're not quite as compassionate.
Is morality then sort of culturally determined, or?
I think it has an impact.
What do you think?
I think it has an impact because, me and my brother grew up in the same house, and we both hold the same morals, even though we have different beliefs. And I think a lot of times people assume that morality comes from a certain place, and I think it comes from the desire to just want to not be a bad person. And sometimes people who are brought up in bad childhoods, they never got to experience that or even understand the difference.
Okay. So in terms of the, I mean, some of those hot button issues that are out there in
Mm-hmm.
society, whether it be, you know, LGBT rights or,
Right.
issues like abortion, where there's all this variety of spectrum of views and differences, is, I guess what I'm wondering is if morality is this common thing that people have, then why wouldn't there be more agreement on some of those issues? What would you say to that?
I think that we agree on more things than we realize. People are good at focusing on the slight things that separate us. And I had this conversation with a friend of mine. She's very religious, and it bothers her that I'm an atheist. And she knows I'd never do anything to cause her trouble, but every time I see her, it comes out in conversation that she just has to bring it up, and I always try to stay away from it because there's always tension there, and I didn't want that. And I said, so what do you think the difference is between our beliefs? And she goes, well, it's drastically different. I believe in heaven and hell, and you don't. And I said, well, it depends on the angle you're looking at it. As far as I'm concerned, you are atheist to, if let's say round it down to an even number of 6,000 gods that have been worshipped, you are atheist to 5,999 of them. I mean, we're 0.06% different. So it's easy to focus on something that seems huge when really there's not much of a difference. So all the atheists that I know, the ones that help out, you'd never even know they were atheists. They don't talk about it.
Sure.
They've got the same convictions and the same moral code as anybody else. So culture does play a key in that, but I think we can see through it and understand, hey, that person's not treating that person well. I probably shouldn't do that to other people.
What would you say then, and we talk about morality and suffering and things like that, but what's really, is there an underlying problem in the world that you see, and if so, I mean, how do we fix that? What's your answer to that?
I don't know how we fix it. It does bother me quite a bit. No one wants to help out the next guy who's fallen. I shouldn't say no one. It's I just did the same thing. I made a generalization.
Yeah.
But I kind of a random story. We were at a concert at Wing Stadium, and the 4x8 sheets of plywood that were on the ice.
Yeah.
Everyone in the crowd found a way to separate and lift them up and then surf across them. Caused a lot of damage. Caused a lot of trouble for the arena. But everybody who didn't know each other, who had no experience in any kind of construction before, all found a way to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I think that we could do that easily as a culture. If we work together, if we use the same code as I don't want somebody to do that to me, so much as cutting somebody off in traffic, something small like that. I don't want that done to me. I need to be conscious to not do that to somebody else. I think we could eliminate a lot of those problems that you're talking about if we just focused on those little tiny details and stopped separating ourselves with details that are even smaller.
Okay. And then you mentioned in our previous conversation over Facebook the place of education in terms of
Education is key, absolutely. When you talk about abortion, if we were to educate people, maybe there wouldn't be as many teen pregnancies. You can pick any social issue. If we were educated on the topics, there's not as much killings with guns in areas where there's higher education and safety with them. Some countries, that's when you become an adult, you are trained with a firearm, and they don't have all the accidents. They don't have all the crimes. It's a different standard that they have because of education, and we lack in a lot of those areas here in the States, I feel.
What would you say, I mean, kind of related to that, in terms of just the suffering that we see in the world, even aside from, I guess, the conflicts or the moral disagreements, just the existence of hardship and suffering.
Mm.
I mean, what do you think do you see any hope for that? What do you see as the response for people? What advice would you give someone processing, say you're dealing with somebody who's really been through a lot of hardship?
Mm-hmm.
And what would you say to them? Say it's somebody who's come in for food and talks to you. And
That is a very tough question because I think it varies per person. You kind of got to get a feel for who they are. there's a very fine line between helping and enabling. And I don't have the answer for that. I know a lot of the people that we've helped, they were no better off for it, and sometimes even worse off, because we just encouraged them to not try because they knew where they could get something for free. And that's frustrating, but we never mention it. Somebody pulls up in a brand new vehicle and comes and takes something off the table, we say nothing, that it's for whoever wants it for free. And that's a question I don't think I'm qualified to answer. These things do bug me. I've stayed up at night thinking about how we can change certain things, but I think it's a teamwork effort. We all kind of have to be on the same page, and it might have to get worse before we can come to that conclusion. Unfortunately, I don't know how to get everybody on the same page. I mean, we're over fighting right now about two terrible candidates for president, and somehow we're divided over that. It's everywhere. Division is just everywhere.
Now, what would you say then? So, in terms of your own background, I mean, were you raised with some kind of religious background at all, or not at all?
I was raised as Christian as 80% of the country. My wife, she says that she's Catholic. Her family says they're Catholic. Not once have I seen them go to a Catholic mass. Okay. I call them Diet Catholic. So I think we all have a belief, and so my parents. I guess I don't know. They have no problem with me being an atheist. I don't think it bothers them, but it doesn't bother them that my brother's really Christian. We called ourselves Christians, but we didn't go to church a lot. We saw stuff at funerals and weddings, and that's the prayers we learned. And
so, what do you think then about Jesus? Do you think he's a historical figure? Do you think he's real? Do you think it's? What's your take on?
I think he could very easily have been a person. A lot of the stories, there have been suggestions that maybe it was other people, and then that narrative was put to his name. The same with Muhammad. The same with all the Abrahamic religions have a pretty similar book. They're just deciding who they feel the Messiah was, and I do think he could have very easily been a person. And that's a very small blip on the map where everything in the Quran and the Bible all came from. And I think these people could have easily walked. There wasn't a lot of science understanding then. If you were able to go back in time with just a couple of magic tricks, you really could have been a very persuasive person. So they believed a lot of things then, including the world being flat. There's so many things that they didn't understand. So yes, I do think that Jesus could have very easily been a person walking around, and the stories all add up and fit a narrative, and I can see how the religion was created and how the other religions they were basically just fighting over the Messiah, pretty much.
Obviously, some atheist people are very, like you said, are very aggressive, very, about saying that, I think some would even say that religion is the world's problem. It just sounds like you wouldn't put yourself there.
No, I do have a lot of conflicts with religion, but I'm not saying I would have a conflict with a religious person because of that. I don't like cancer, but if my aunt had cancer, I don't hate my aunt for it. So, like I said before, there's a lot that you lose if you don't have faith anymore. The grandma example, that there's a lot of benefit to it. Anytime somebody has hope, they have an energy that can't be matched. We're capable of amazing things when we put our mind to it. And whatever that is that gives you hope, I think is a necessary thing. And, I've got really good friends who, they quit doing drugs after years and years of addiction, and they did it for Jesus. I'm never going to have a conversation about religion with them because I want them to keep that. That's something that they should never lose. That was a good thing. So religion can do a lot of amazing things. It can also do a lot of poor things, and that all comes down to interpretation, which I think loops us back to the morality. You either have it or you don't.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of covered everything that I was hoping to talk about. So
can I ask you a few?
Absolutely.
Oh, before you met me,
yeah,
your views on an atheist versus now, has anything changed in your mind?
I would say no. I tend to think that, I guess I'm not a real black and white thinker sometimes in terms of trying to see all the colors and variations.
Sure.
In fact, that's even part of the goal of this whole
That's awesome.
series is
That's
to
what I was
kind of
hoping.
bring out the complexities of things. You know, I kind of like getting lost in the weeds of things and seeing where different people stand. So, you know, I realize, you know, there's a very small percentage of very vocal atheists, you know, the Richard Dawkins types and those
Right.
sorts of people. And, you know, and I'm kind of intentionally staying away from that because it'd be real easy, you know, for me to read up on Richard Dawkins and quote him and argue against him and create this great fight. But I don't think that's necessarily helpful because I don't think that's where most people really are.
Correct.
So yeah, I really appreciate your honesty in talking through things. And you know, it's I think your comment about morality is really interesting because one of the passages, there's a passage in the book of Romans where it talks about how God's written his law on people's hearts. And so it's interesting because that's one of the arguments I would use then to try to say, yeah, this moral sense that people have, I think that it's something that God created us with. You know, I tend to think if we were just evolved that that we wouldn't have that sense now. I mean, of course, like we were talking about, I mean, you could say it's just culture, but
Well, and to clarify that, you know, you can look up YouTube videos all day of, you know, a gorilla helping a bird out of the water. I do think that it is instinct to help something else that needs help. I think that's very common, and I guess I'm not opposed to, if we were created to have that, I guess I'm not opposed to that. I'm seeing less of that than I'd like to if that were the case. I guess I've always wanted, you know, we've had people say, you're doing the Lord's work, you just don't do it. I smile and say, thank you, have a good day. But what bugs me about that is, you know, the Lord is having me do his work, but he's not giving me that Damascus Road experience to where I just have the empirical evidence that I can demonstrate. And, you know, if I were to tell somebody to pray for me to believe, what would you pray for God to say right now that would change my mind? If God wanted me to know, it seems like it'd be easy for me to know. So when somebody says that I'm doing this in the name of God, I don't lead on like I'm offended, but it is a little bit, I'm allowed to burn in hell for being a good person, but I'm not allowed to have the revelation, you know, so.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, I guess my thought is that God has placed that upon people's heart, but the way the passage goes is that people really don't go along with it.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of describes, you know, what we see in the world where there is so much, you know, I mean, and it's sort of a, like you say, it's sort of a personal thing, right? I mean, there's some things that maybe some sins that I'm drawn toward, and some that somebody else wouldn't be tempted by, and some that, you know, well, I mean, in working with people on the streets, of course, a lot of them are like you mentioned, struggle with addiction. There's a big history of that in my family. And yet, I mean, I'm really not tempted by that. Maybe partly because I saw how destructive it was, but it makes me want to stay away from that. But there's other things that I could, you know, do. And so, you know, that kind of comes back, you know, for me of why I see, or at least in my life, because I didn't grow up with a religious background either. I didn't go to church at all. My parents had never taken me, never given me any explanation. But I guess part of the thing that connected with me was seeing, okay, I do have this sin, and feeling like I needed God's forgiveness. And finding that in Christianity was kind of the route for me. But
I know other people too who she asks me questions a lot about it because she feels like she's an atheist, but she goes to the church there in Gobles because
Interesting.
the community
Yeah.
aspect of it is
Yeah.
great. And you know, I wish that there was more atheist communities like that because everyone getting together for the same thing. How could that be a bad thing? And you know, you're looking at people with different political. When these seats are all full, not everybody agrees on their political candidate. Not everybody
Right.
agrees on any of the social topics, but they're all agreeing on one thing, and there's that unity. So I do wish that there was more atheist groups out there, and it's starting to grow. Maybe it's because it was ostracized before. I don't know, but
Yeah.
that is something
Yeah.
that would be nice. You definitely have something.
That's
I
interesting.
don't.
Yeah, and I've heard some discussions about that. People talking about is atheism becoming, taking on a religious side, and I think even kind of what you've done, kind of speaks to
right.
that.
Right.
But yet it still doesn't have the, the kind of form or ritual or something that kind of feels like other religions.
Right.
It does.
Right.
It's just not really there.
I think social media, of all the things you can complain about, it has created awareness, and not just that, with every possible thing. Where if you were growing up in school and you didn't tell anybody a secret because you thought you were going to be ostracized, now they can go online and meet millions of people just like them.
Yeah.
And so I think that more people are coming out as atheists and starting to do more stuff like that. I don't know if it'll ever turn into a Sunday thing, but I guess I wouldn't be looking for that, but that doesn't mean that more groups couldn't get together. We're doing this once a month. If
Right.
there were 3 other groups also doing it once a month and we alternated, then every single week we could be out there on Sunday giving away food.
Sure.
So, it could very easily grow without breaking my heart. That would be cool.